Chapter 11, Begging for Mercy. In the fight for Danpiga Realm, one's muscles, bones and even skin would be tempered, causing one's strength to soar rapidly. The difference between it and Zenki Realm was like heaven to earth. Yet, the brat in Zenki Realm was able to cause a Piga Realm expert to vomit blood with just a single slap. Everyone found the sight unbelievable. Besides, wasn't this fellow the last in the sparring during the teacher qualification examination? Why is he so strong now? It must just be a coincidence. Do not fear him. Qian Biao howled. One of the teachers also agreed with what Qian Biao said and charged over. Just like Li Yuan, he had reached Piga Realm advanced stage. His muscles were just like metal tendons and his skin was just like a metal plate, giving an impression of indestructibility. You shall fall to the ground. Stepping forward, this teacher lifted his eyebrow and prepared to smack him with his palm. Pa. The compression of the air resulted in explosive sonic booms. Facing the other party's ruthless blows, Zhang Xuan remained calm with his forefinger and middle finger together. He struck upwards at a slanted angle. Pada. The teacher, whose body was like a metal plate, felt a slight pain at his armpits before his vision went dark and he collapsed onto the floor. What? In 2 strikes, 2 Fighter 4 Dan teachers were defeated. The remaining 2 teachers, including Qian Biao, knew that the teacher whom they had been looking down upon wasn't as simple as they thought to be. Let's attack together. With a loud roar, Qian Biao raised his fist and charged over. However, even before he made a move, Zhang Xuan suddenly appeared right before him. His left hand grabbed his face while his right hand poked him lightly. Putong. A pain in the abdomen and Qian Biao collapsed to the floor as well. The moment his body hit the floor, the last teacher whom he teamed up with also fell to the ground and convulsed as though he was epileptic. How did you know all of our Mingmen? With a spurt of fresh blood, Qian Biao stared at the fellow in front of him in fright. He finally understood why, even though the other party's strength was far from them, the results ended in the direct opposite. Their opponent found the Mingmen of their cultivation the moment he struck. How could they have possibly expected this and guard against it? All cultivators would tend to have a Mingmen as their weakness, and the moment it was struck, even if the person striking was a child, it would be possible to kill the person. However, Mingmen was the core of a human, thus cultivators would protect it carefully. Even the closest kin would not know where their Mingmen is. Although Zhang Xuan did not possess strong cultivation, he seemed to know where their Mingmen was and strike at their vitals directly. How could they resist against someone like that? Hearing his words of astonishment, Zhang Xuan smiled without explaining. Of course, it was through the Library of Heaven's Path. Not only did the Library of Heaven's Path allow him to see through flaws in one's cultivation techniques, he was also able to see the personal problems of the cultivator and his Mingmen. They were all written in detail on it. Knowing his opponent's Mingmen and the weaknesses in their skills, even if Zhang Xuan transcended from Earth and still wasn't very familiar with the skills of this foreign world, it was still a simple task to subdue the 4 of them. Since you all chose to accept the bet, you all should have prepared yourself for the consequences of losing the bet. If you all had obediently allowed me to slap you all, we wouldn't have to go through so much trouble. Zhang Xuan chuckled. Zhang Xuan, you don't need to get gleeful over it. I don't know what kind of despicable methods you used to find out where our Mingmen is to wound me, but as the least experienced teacher, you attacked other teachers in public. Just by this alone, I am able to send a complaint letter to the academy to have your teacher qualification revoked. Qian Biao howled. There were clear levels between teachers in the academy. For lower level teachers to make a move against higher level teachers was an immoral action. Zhang Xuan was young, and he also scored 0 for his teacher qualification examination. Thus, he was considered as one of the least qualified teacher in the academy. For him to wound 4 people who were more qualified than him, if the academy were to be informed of this incident, there would definitely be an uproar. His teacher qualification license being revoked was a small matter. It might be possible for him to be directly expelled. Why? Since you can't defeat me using martial arts, you want to try to the rules to suppress me? Despite facing such threats, Zhang Xuan didn't seem to be bothered by it. Indeed, Li Yuan was also thinking about this. Excitement and cruelty flashed across his eyes. If you obediently kneel before us now and allow us to beat you up, perhaps when our moods lift, we won't report the incident. Otherwise, prepare to be fired. After being fired from your position, without your identity as a teacher protecting you, no one will say anything even if you are killed. Another teacher howled. In Tanxian Kingdom, the teachers of an academy were of high social status. The moment they lost their job, their social status would also fall correspondingly. If so, the few of them would really dare to make a move to kill him. Since you all want to deal with this using rules, alright, I will also deal with this using rules then. With a tranquil gaze, he walked a few steps to Qian Biao and said, Qian Biao Loshi, you secretly used Elder Chen Ming's treasure to please your concubine. 3 months ago, you embezzled from the school's fund to buy a house for her. A month ago, when you broke Elder Liu Quin's most beloved porcelain, you pushed the blame onto a student, causing him to be expelled. Do I need to be recounting all of these matters in front of the school leaders? You. Qian Biao's eyes narrowed as his plump body twitched uncontrollably. An inconceivable fear surged through his entire body. He looked as though he had seen a ghost and was on the verge of going insane. He committed all of those without leaving behind any traces, so no one knew about it. Even his colleagues, Li Yuan and the others, weren't aware. So this fellow, how did he know about it? Furthermore, with such details, Li Yuan Loshi, did the female student, whom you robbed of her dignity that resulted in her suicide from 3 years ago, return as a vengeful spirit to look for you? A few days ago, you grew an acne on your back. Perhaps, this could be her seeking you for revenge. Ignoring Qian Biao's terrified expression, Zhang Xuan turned to look at Li Yuan. Hearing those words, Li Yuan hurriedly backed away from fright as his face drained of all color. 3 years ago, he was enchanted by a beautiful female student and he humiliated her, causing her to commit suicide from shame. This incident was very coveted and except for him, no one knew about it due to his conscience acting up against him. Throughout the 3 years, he often dreamt of the other party coming to reap his life as a vengeful spirit. Furthermore, half a month ago, a giant acne in the shape of a human palm grew on his back, scaring him out of his wits. After hearing Zhang Xuan recount this event with great details, his entire body trembled uncontrollably out of overwhelming fear. Putong. His knees lost his strength and he kneeled onto the floor. A sudden pungent smell wafted around the room. To think a fighter 4 Dan advanced stage expert would be frightened to the point of peeing out in public. Du Chunloshi, you stole your good brother's business and even poisoned him to death through toxic wine. Although this incident was inconclusive back then, if rumors were to spread out now, do you think that you can continue being a teacher? Bailin Loshi, there isn't any major flaws in your actions. However, due to your interest in antiques, you have accepted many gifts from the students. If I'm not wrong, the ancient jade ring which you wear should be a gift from back then when a student had something to request of you. As for what the request is about and who the student is, do you still need me to go into details? Looking at the 2 remaining teachers, Zhang Xuan stated, You are a devil. You aren't human. The remaining 2 teachers were also all frightened out of their wits this time. Their stares were full of fear. Those things that they have done, although it might not be impeccable, they were confident that no outsider would know of it yet. How could this fella be so aware of it? It was as though he was a spectre. When he defeated them through his skills, they only felt ashamed, but not fear. However, when he revealed all of their secrets, they were truly terrified. It was as though the multiple clothes on them were instantly ripped to shreds, causing them to stand nude in front of everyone else. They could already imagine that when the information leaked out, whether they could remain as teachers was already a small affair. In the worst case scenario, they might be sent to the teacher court and be killed on the spot. We were wrong. Zhang Xuan Loshi, as a great man, don't bear grudges against minor figures like us. Please spare us. Trembling, they unwillingly begged for mercy. I am lazy to bother with what you all did in the past, just stop pissing me off in the future. Also, if you all don't change and continue committing more vile actions, I won't mind interfering to ensure that you all will receive punishments proportionate to your crime. Zhang Xuan waved his hand in disdain. Actually, if these people didn't get on his nerves, he wouldn't be bothered with them. The Library of Heaven's Path was able to peer into all of one's flaws. Even personality and past actions were counted in its midst. Not to mention that this was only a small portion of the entire book. However, he wasn't the savior of the world, so no matter what they did in the past and do in the future, as long as they did not cross his path, he wouldn't be concerned with them. What these people should have never done was to find trouble with him and make things difficult for him. Since you made things difficult for me, I will show you what death looks like, so that you will never dare to think of doing the same the second time. We don't dare, we will never dare to. Zhang Xuan Loshi, these are the identity tokens that you wanted. Take as much as you want to. Hearing that he would not expose their past actions, Qian Biao and the rest heaved a sigh of relief. Chapter 12, Emperor Bloodline. An hour later, Zhang Xuan walked out from the logistics branch and his eyes twinkled in excitement. If it had been his previous self, he would have ended up being taken advantage of. Today, however, with the Library of Heaven's Path, his life took a complete turn towards another direction. Perhaps, it is a blessing for me to transcend over. This kind of exciting life is what I hope for. Zhang Xuan clenched his fist and exhaled a breath of air. In his previous life, he was only a librarian living a plain and simple life that only rotated around the library and his home. Even if he were to continue on like that, he would only continue claiming his salary and continue with his aimless life. However, things were different here with a great gift package known as the Library of Heaven's Path. Perhaps he would be able to walk further and become stronger. He would be able to live an entirely new and exciting life. At this moment, Zhang Xuan had finally become a part of the world. He no longer struggled in his heart over the dilemma between his homeland and this world. Don't pull me, let me die. I want to die. Just when he was secretly celebrating, he heard a piercing wail from a distance not too far away. It sounded like a frenzied bull, causing one's heart to tear in agony. Turning around, he saw a fatty howling that he would charge towards the man-made lake in the academy and commit suicide by jumping into it. Behind the fatty, no one tried to stop him. The fatty himself also didn't charge forward despite howling non-stop. Suddenly, he turned around and grabbed the palm of a student beside him and put it on himself, making it seem as though the student is pulling him back. Then, he continued howling, "Don't pull me, let me die. I don't want to live anymore." Everyone was speechless. That's too shameless. Zhang Xuan shook his head. This fatty, despite not wanting to die, insisted on portraying a fake image of someone being restrained from committing suicide. He was really shameless. Knowing that this fellow couldn't possibly die, he couldn't be bothered with him anymore. Instead, he walked towards his own classroom. Before he could walk far, the howling voice seemed to close in on him as the ground trembled, following which, a pair of thick arms hugged his leg. "Teacher, I'm begging you, please accept me as your disciple. They all scorn me because of my size and reject me." The fatty burst into tears. "Let go." Zhang Xuan was speechless. Wasn't this fellow too eccentric? Rushing over to beg him to accept him as his disciple. Upon seeing that he was a teacher, Zhang Xuan had never seen such a person in his life. "Teacher, I will only let go if you accept me." Tears and snot flowed freely from the multiple facets of the fatty. His voice sounded so sorrowful that even those who were watching from the side started to sympathize with him. "Today, I have already visited over 10 teachers, but none of them were willing to accept me. This teacher over here, seeing how pitiful I am, please accept me." The examinations among the students would also affect a teacher's evaluation. A plump person like him would tend to have trouble in his battles and his agility. Most renowned teachers would be unwilling to accept him. "If you want me to accept you, you would have to at least show me your abilities. What do you expect to achieve by hugging my leg?" Zhang Zuan said. He possessed the Library of Heaven's Path, so he should have no trouble recruiting students if this person turned out to be mediocre. Zhang Zuan would not accept him as his disciple. Teacher, you have to accept me as your disciple. I am quite capable. The fatty looked up hesitantly before slowly loosening his arms. We have to see before we know whether you are capable or not. There is no use saying so much. Seeing how he was still slightly reluctant to release his grip, Zhang Zuan kicked him away scornfully. What was this? It would be one thing for a female student hugging his leg, however. Not only was he a male, he was also a fatty. He shivered just by the thought of it. Fine. Look at my abilities. The fatty didn't feel scorned. He stood up and surveyed the surroundings. Then, he carried a few concrete blocks over from a short distance away, after which, lifting one up with his hands, he smashed his head into it. Peng. The concrete block shattered, after which, he carried a few more concrete block and shattered it using his elbow and leg without an exception. They all shattered. This fellow may seem plump, but he is skilled in Henglian martial arts. Ignoring his Henglian, Zhang Zuan was currently looking through the book that was automatically compiled in his mind. The skills trained through Henglian could also be considered as a type of martial arts. The moment the fatty displayed his prowess, the library began to compile his information. Yuan Tao, a wandering cultivator in Daiwang City. Phi 2-1 Danjuxi Realm Intermediate. Flaws, 18 aspects. No 1. The ancient emperor bloodline in his body has yet to be awakened. No 2. His foundations are too weak. The martial arts he trains in, Emperor Bloodline. Looking at the records on the book, Zhang Zuan was taken aback. After merging with the memories of the previous owner of the body, he knew that in this world, bloodline in one's innate body was very important. As long as one possessed either one of the two along with a suitable method to utilize it, their cultivation would soar by leaps and bounds in the future, causing their strength to increase exponentially. There were many types of innate bodies such as pure yin body, pure yang body, immaculate body, golden body. There were also many types of bloodlines such as ancient bloodlines, new bloodlines, inheritances and mutations. Once found, every single one of them would become a target competed over by countless teachers. The emperor bloodline which the fatty possessed was one of the ancient bloodlines. It was said that when those who possessed such bloodline reached the peak of their cultivation, their body would be impenetrable. No objects in the world would be able to break through their defenses. It was one of the most powerful bloodlines among defense-based bloodlines. This inconspicuous, fat and shameless fellow actually possessed an ancient bloodline. His ancient bloodline has yet to be awakened. From the looks of it, this fellow doesn't seem to be aware of it as well. A glint flashed through Zhang Zuan's eyes. Of all types of bloodlines, ancient bloodlines were quite powerful. For this fellow to not be accepted after visiting a dozen of teachers, it didn't mean that they were unable to recognize such a bloodline. Rather, his bloodline had yet to be awakened, causing him to be just like any other normal people, not mentioning how other people weren't able to discern his bloodline. Probably even he himself didn't know about it. However, even if he didn't know, he did have the potential in this aspect. His defensive abilities were much stronger than the others, and that's the reason why he chose to train in this kind of punchbag martial arts. I must accept this fellow under my tutelage. His eyes twinkled. The entire academy might not even witness a single student possessing ancient bloodline throughout a course of multiple of years for such a good bud to appear before him. How could he possibly allow him to escape? Not bad. I will accept you as my student. Come, acknowledge me as your teacher. Zhang Zuan suppressed the jubilation in his heart and threw an identity token over to him with a calm face. Teacher, are you really going to accept me? This is great. The fatty seemed to have taken quite a few mental blows throughout the day upon hearing that a teacher was willing to accept him. He was so excited that he cut his finger without second thoughts and squeezed a blood droplet on it. It seems that the standard of the teacher determines the standard of the students he would accept. When the teacher is trash, the student would also be trash. At this moment, a cold scorn sounded out. Turning around, Zhang Zuan saw a cold and arrogant young man walking over. There was a beautiful lady walking beside the young man. Her pitch black silky hair flowed down her shoulders. Her pale skin had a creamy texture to it and her eyes captivated the gaze of those looking into it. Shangbin? Shenbairu? Upon seeing the two of them, two names immediately flooded into his head. In the entire academy, there were probably no one who would be unaware of Shenbairu. She didn't have any unique background, but she was publicly acknowledged as a beautiful teacher. Even the school bell would pale in comparison when compared to her. It wouldn't have meant anything if she was all looks. The crux of it was that she's skilled in teaching as well. Despite being in this academy for less than a year, she had already become one of the most famous teachers in the academy. Noble, elegant, beautiful and intelligent, she attracted the frenzied pursuit of quite a few teachers. Zhang Zuan's previous self was also one of her pursuers. However, the previous Zhang Zuan was too much of a failure, not mentioning his weak cultivation. He was also the last in all kinds of examinations due to his low self-esteem. Even though he was interested in her, he had never talked to the goddess of his heart, needless to say, courted her. This young man was called Shangbin and he was the grandson of the academy's elder Shang. He was also one of her pursuers and he had used his identity to suppress the other pursuers. He seemed to have received word from some source that Zhang Zuan was also interested in Shenbairu, prompting him to insult him whenever they meet, sometimes even resorting to physical violence. However, Shenbairu didn't seem to be interested in him all along. She had been cold to everyone, as though she wasn't interested in anyone else, leaving Shangbin distressed and helpless. Who are you insulting as trash? Hearing Shangbin's unrestrained sarcasm, Zhang Zuan didn't get angry and turned around to look over. Trash is insulting to you? Shangbin smiled contemptuously. Oh, so trash is insulting to me? So smelly, so smelly? Zhang Xuan waved his hand in front of his nose, putting on a disgusted expression. You only now did Shang Bin react, being made fun of by the worst teacher in the academy. His face turned red. Emperor bloodline, Longxi bloodline. In ancient China, they believe in looking at one's facial features to determine one's future naturally. There's a face for one destined for nobility as well. One of these noble faces is this Longxi face, which is usually termed as the face of an emperor. This fellow may seem plump, but he is skilled in Hanglian martial arts. Note, Hanglian is a way of training and literally means training through brute strength. There are three main ways of training in martial arts: Wanlian, New Line and Hanglian according to Baidu. The three different way of training will lead the martial artists to different peaks. Hanglian refers to a method which uses smashing of one's body onto a hard object in order to train their body parts. Even today, Hanglian is still used as a way of training by a few. Like the Iron Head skills, they smash their head on solid objects from young. Chapter 13, Shameless Student. Upon hearing those words, the ice-cold Shenbairu smiled faintly. Although this roundabout manner of insulting another meant nothing on earth, it was an incomparably novel concept here. Seeing the expression on his goddess, Shang Bin felt that he was being mocked. His face flushed in a moment and paled in the next. However, in front of the female goddess, he was determined to uphold decorum, thus he didn't dare to attack Zhang Xuan directly. Why? Is there something wrong with my words? Suppressing his anger, Shang Bin sneered. There isn't a single person who doesn't know what your standards are in the entire academy. This fatty came to my classroom previously fat like a pig. He only knows how to defend and nothing else. The strength behind his fist is only a mere 15 kilograms. He must be either the first or second from the bottom in the entrance examination. So if he isn't trash, what is he? Even though he couldn't teach Zhang Xuan a lesson physically, he was resolute to strike a blow onto him through his words. The first from the bottom in the entrance examination? Zhang Xuan only paid attention to the emperor bloodline and wasn't aware of such a situation. He turned around to look at the fatty, who says that I am the first from the bottom. The fatty retorted confidently. Then, he scratched his head in embarrassment. I am only the 9,997th place. 9,997th place? Only? A faint spell afflicted Zhang Xuan and he almost vomited blood. Hongshan Academy only accepted 10,000 students every year. Although it recruited so many people every year, there were always several students who failed to report due to several reasons. 9,997th place. It was almost as good as being in the last place. Alright. Besides, with such a low ranking, how can you still be so confident? Zhang Xuan felt as though he hadn't fully woken up. It can't be that you accept anyone who is a student? Shang Bin sneered once again. Then, flinging his sleeves, an arrogant look appeared on his face as he declared, I have a clear requirement when accepting students. I don't accept anyone who is below the 500th in rank. The teacher who is first from the bottom and the student who is first from the bottom, how compatible? Ha ha. Are you done talking? Towards his mockery, Zhang Xuan simply shook his head. Now that you're done, you can leave. Previously, he had examined Yuan Tao clearly with the Library of Heaven's Path that Fatty was a wandering cultivator, so it was normal for him to know no cultivation technique and martial arts. As long as he found a way to awaken his emperor bloodline, his cultivation would definitely soar by leaps and bounds. If it was someone else, being mocked to such an extent, they would definitely be trembling from anger. However, this fellow didn't even bat an eyelid to it for Shang Bin's attack to land on thin air. His face turned even uglier. It seems that a rotten wood cannot be carved. After a cold humph, Shang Bin looked at Shinbairu beside him and said, Bairuloshi, let's go. If we stay with this kind of trash for too long, we would be contaminated by them. Hearing Shang Bin's direct sarcasm, Shinbairu frowned and chose not to leave with him. Instead, she turned around. Zhang Xuan Loshi. Her voice was like an aureole, clear and enchanting, stirring up complex emotions in its listeners. Zhang Xuan didn't expect that the academy's prettiest teacher would initiate a conversation with him. He was taken aback. Although the previous time you didn't score so well for your teacher qualification examination, do not give up on yourself. Work hard and you will find yourself rewarded in the end. Shinbairu nodded her head. From her point of view, Zhang Xuan accepting one of the worst students meant that he didn't hold any hope and had given up on himself. Towards this ex-pursuer of hers, even if she didn't fancy him, she didn't hope to see him wallowing in his failures. Thank you for your advice. He knew that the other party was truly concerned for him. Zhang Xuan nodded his head and explained, this student, although he might not be anything now, he could turn out to be a jade as long as I guide him properly. It isn't impossible for him to shine. Shinbairu didn't speak any further and instead started to walk away. She thought that Zhang Xuan's explanation was only an excuse given Yuan Tao's size and his lack of basic knowledge at his age. There was bound to be a limit to his future achievements. Darn it. Seeing the goddess of his heart talking to the worst teacher in the academy and even motivating him, Shang Bin's face distorted savagely. The inferno in his heart raged as he stared at Zhang Xuan coldly before following behind Shinbairu. Bairu, it is better for you to avoid contact with this kind of people. It will sully your flawless disposition. Shang Loshi, I'm a little tired today and would like to rest. I hope that you do not follow me. Before Shang Bin could finish his words, Shinbairu turned around to leave. Damn it. Zhang Xuan, just you wait. I will definitely get back at you for this. He watched as his goddess walked further and further away before she disappeared from sight. At this moment, he had already directed all of his anger towards Zhang Xuan. In his opinion, if it wasn't for that inauspicious fellow, the goddess would definitely have dinner with him. How could it be possible for her to turn around to leave? Since you have acknowledged me as your teacher, you must know where my classroom is. After the both of them left, Zhang Xuan turned his attention away from them and called out to the fatty. Great. The fatty hurriedly stood up and smiled at him. Teacher, now that I am your student, can you tell me which teacher are you in the academy? Hearing his words, Zhang Xuan grabbed his forehead. This fellow, to think that he acknowledged whichever teacher he managed to set his eyes upon, not even clarifying Zhang Xuan's identity beforehand. I am Zhang Xuan. Zhang Xuan said. Zhang Xuan Loshi? The Zhang Loshi who scored first from the bottom for the teacher qualification examination, not to mention a 0 at this moment. Fatty finally realized who he acknowledged as his teacher. The fats on his body trembled as his lip twitched. All he was lacking now is tears. That's me. Zhang Xuan nodded his head. Ah, that, Zhang Loshi. Fatty scratched his head seeing how I am weak and dim-witted. Not to mention fat, why don't you take me out from your lessons? Zhang Xuan, teacher, I am being serious over here. The two teachers from a moment ago have also said it. If you don't expel me from your tutelage, your reputation would be sullied. I am afraid of pulling you down with me. Fatty continued. I am not afraid of being pulled down. Besides, now that we have verified our relationship through the identity token, I only have a sentence for you. You will live as my student and die as my student. Stop talking about useless things here. Zhang Xuan waved his hand. Fatty's face distorted and he was on the verge of crying. Due to his weakness, he wanted to acknowledge a good student, so that his future could be boundless. However, never would he dream that the last place student would be paired with a last place teacher. Why is my life so difficult? Alright, this is my classroom now, claim your bedding and remember to come to lessons punctually tomorrow. Zhang Xuan said impatiently. This classroom. Looking at the size of the classroom, Fatty found himself on the verge of tears yet again. Even the locations where he underwent the entrance examination previously were much bigger than this. A classroom of this size probably couldn't hold many students. Teacher, if I don't come tomorrow, would you expel me? Fatty was still bearing illusions in his mind. Expel? That I won't. However, I will throw you into the lake which you wanted to jump into to feed the turtles. Zhang Xuan nodded his head. Seriously, didn't I say it? You will live as my student and die as my student. Relax. I will fulfill the role of my teacher and bury you properly. Teacher. Before Zhang Xuan could finish his words, he was interrupted by Fatty with a serious face and unwavering will in his eyes. He said, what time do we start lessons tomorrow? I will come in advance to clean the classroom. It is my honor to meet such a great teacher in the future. No matter who wants to admit me as their disciple, I will reject them firmly and reprimand them. Zhang Xuan. Initially, Zhang Xuan thought that he himself was shameless. However, he didn't expect that his student would be even more shameless than he was. Chapter 14, Cultivation Technique. It wasn't easy for Zhang Xuan to arrange everything properly with Fatty and send him away. Only then did he realize that the sun was already setting in the west and it was about to turn dark soon. Looks like I'll only have 5 students. He shook his head. Today was the last day to recruit students. Judging from the current time, it was probably the end of the recruitment. Initially, he thought that he wouldn't even recruit a student. He didn't expect that he would end up pulling 5 students in for a teacher who scored the worst in the teacher qualification examination. It wasn't a bad result. Closing the doors to the classroom, Zhang Xuan followed the path back to his room based on his memory. As a teacher of the academy, he had a dormitory room of his own. However, it was only a small room of around a dozen meters square large. Soon, he reached the dormitory. Pushing the door open and looking at the sight within, he couldn't help but sigh. His previous self really had it bad, not mentioning how the room was small. It was extremely humid. Mold was growing on some of the bedding and such. He really had no idea how that fellow managed to survive like this. Let's forget about this. First lessons are going to start tomorrow, so I have to first ascertain my level of cultivation and try training a bit. Since he wasn't hungry now anyway, Zhang Xuan followed the method he recalled in his memories and sat with crossed legs on the bed. As a transcender, although he had inherited the memories of his previous self and wasn't foreign to cultivating, he was still quite excited at the thought of growing stronger. After he was done with the recruitment, it was about time for him to solidify his cultivation no matter what. In this world, strength reigned supreme. The Library of Heaven's Path was capable of identifying others' Mingmen and flaws, allowing him to easily break through the defenses of opponents of the same level. However, if his enemy was much stronger than he was, even if he was able to identify the gaps in their attacks, he would be unable to keep up with them speed-wise before he could injure his opponent. He might already have been severed into multiple pieces like Lab Rat. Thus, even though the Library of Heaven's Path was formidable, it didn't ensure his invincibility. If he wanted to become stronger, cultivation was the way to go. The cultivation technique of my previous self is called the Hongshan 9 Dan formula. It is a skill created by the founder of Hongshan Academy. The skill consists of 9 dans, with each of the dan corresponding to the cultivation realm of the cultivator. He recalled the skill memorized in his head. There were 9 dans to a cultivator and every level opened up a new realm. The higher one climbed, the harder it was to cultivate. Hongshan 9 dan formula was one of the most common cultivation technique in Hongshan Academy. It also consisted of 9 dans which corresponded to the cultivator's 9 dans. Right now, I am the weakest of all of the teachers in the academy. In the academy, almost all teachers have reached Fighter 4 Dan, leaving him to be the only 3 Dan. Thus, he had to train harder to catch up to them. Following the exhalation method in his memory, he focused his concentration. In an instant, countless bright particles appeared before him as he slowly inhaled and exhaled while absorbing them gradually. Their Zenki within his dungeon enriched. After cultivating for an unknown period of time, Zhang Xuan opened his eyes and shook his head. This is way too slow. Even though he had inherited the memories of his previous self, his consciousness still remained that of an earthling. He found it difficult to be sitting still to cultivate for long periods of time, especially upon viewing the process of the gathering of Zenki. He felt even more helpless. Gathering Zenki referred to the action of pulling and gathering in of the spirit particles in the air and suppressing them together, just like the stacking of logs. They would be accumulated to form a river. This was an extremely huge project. There were some cultivators who persisted in it every day without fail and filled up their dungeon within 3 years to break into higher realms. It was a work that required accumulation over time. To cultivate so blandly for multiple years, you might as well kill him. Oh, that's right. Although the Hongshan 9 Dan formula is the most popular cultivation technique in the academy, It isn't the strongest one. I can use the Library of Heaven's Path to seek out its flaws and find a way to correct them. Once I correct the flaws, won't my training be much more efficient? A thought popped into his mind. There were different tiers to cultivation technique as well. Better cultivation technique allowed one to cultivate faster while the weak ones caused one to cultivate at a slower pace. Could it be that the better cultivation technique had fewer flaws, causing the difference between the two? Other people might be unable to improve their cultivation technique, but Zhang Xuan was different. With the Library of Heaven's Path on hand, he could make use of it to seek out the flaws in it and think of a way to correct them. If he were to create a cultivation technique where even the Library of Heaven's Path was unable to find a flaw in, wouldn't his cultivation speed soar significantly? At this point, Zhang Xuan stood up, placed the Hongshan 9 Dan formula on his palm and started flipping through it. Just as he expected, the library in his mind jolted and a book with the exact same name appeared in it. Opening the book gently, he realized that there were countless flaws on the Hongshan 9 Dan formula on it, numbering more than 1,000. This is the skill that I was training with a moment ago? Zhang Xuan was shocked. Just a simple 3 Dan and there were countless flaws in it. Wasn't this way too much? It was just like eating a vegetable full of worms. Zhang Xuan felt that it was already incredible that his cultivation hadn't disappeared after training in that skill. What about the other cultivation techniques? As a teacher, there were quite a few books in his room. Supreme 4 Inscription, Heaven Meridian Technique, Lotus Acupoint Breakthrough Might. As he casually picked each of them and flipped through them, the library would automatically compile a corresponding book on it that recorded all kinds of flaws in the skill. For these skills, the flaws that were recorded exceeded 3,000. That was even scarier than the Hongshan 9 Dan formula. This won't I die out of exhaustion while searching for a way to correct all of those? After taking a look, Zhang Xuan felt like he was about to go mad from frustration. It was hard to find a correct path when there were more than 1,000 flaws in a secret manual. It was like having 1,000 different paths before you, and each of which have countless divergence to them. Even if the Library of Heaven's Path was capable of ascertaining whether the path is right or not, finding the most accurate path would definitely tire him to death. Right now, my cultivation is at Fighter 3 Dan Zenki Pinnacle, just a little bit away from breaking through right now. I only have to find the flaw in the secret manual regarding this aspect and correct it. Upon seeing the countless mistakes in Hongshan 9 Dan formula, he knew that it was impossible for him to resolve them in a short period of time. Thus, he flipped the manual to the very last page. It was difficult to train in the Fighter 3 Dan, but the last step to breaking through was significantly easier. As he expected, there were only 10 flaws in this page. Error in the method in sensing the spirit in the air, error in manipulating the flow of spirit particles, error in guiding the gathered spirit to flow through the Yang Wei Meridian. The 10 flaws written here were detailed clearly. The Library of Heaven's Path only recorded flaws. It didn't list methods on resolving them. It wasn't easy to search for the correct path one should take. Right. It seems that the parts of the Fighter 3 Dan breakthrough method in the other books have different flaws from this. A thought flashed through his mind as he recalled what was written in the other secret manuals. Thus, he flipped through the other books to view the portion of it about breaking through the Zenki realm. It was indeed as he recalled, although there were mistakes in those as well. Their errors were in different aspects. If it isn't demarcated as an error, then it should be correct. Zhang Xuan's eyes lit up. He immediately grabbed pen and paper and jotted down the correct portion of each of them. Soon, a new cultivation method appeared before him. Let's see if there are errors in this. With a faint smile, he grabbed the book that he had just written, and the Library of Heaven's Path jolted once more. A similar book appeared, just that this time, there's only one error in it. After researching for a moment longer, he corrected this final error and used the Library of Heaven's Path to ascertain once again. Indeed, all of the errors have been filled up and it was in its perfect form. This is the most precise method to break through the Fighter 3 Dan realm. Let me give it a try. Looking at the contents he wrote himself, Zhang Xuan nodded his head excitedly. He hurriedly got into position and started to cultivate. Relax my body and allow my pores to open, as though I am sinking into a tub of spirit air. Every single pore of mine is a complete life form by itself, breathing by its own will. Cultivating through this method, although he wasn't very used to it at the start, it didn't take long for him to feel the spirit in the surrounding surge into him. The spirit absorbed by a single pore might not be much, but when all of the pores of a body were undergoing the same process concurrently, the absorption speed was one to behold. The spirit in the air gathered like a flowing river, forming a giant flood in his body and rushing towards his danshan. Boom! An explosion echoed from his spirit. See, initially, he was just a step away to breaking through his bottleneck. At the current moment, Zenki overflowed from his danshan and coursed through his entire body, enriching his muscles and bones, generating a refreshing sensation. Fighter 4 Dan, Piga Elm. This is too fast. Zhang Xuan's eyes widened. Based on what was recorded on the Hongshan 9 Dan formula, he would need to take at least 3 to 5 months to break through, and this would still require a certain amount of luck after slightly modifying the skill to correct the flaws on it. How long did he take in comparison? 10 minutes? 5 minutes? Probably. He didn't even take 3 minutes to successfully achieve a breakthrough. Furthermore, despite only correcting the breakthrough method for Fighter 3 Dan Pinnacle, the purity of the Zenki he absorbed was incomparably pure, containing much more power as compared to the ones he cultivated in the past. If the Zenki he cultivated in the past was sloppy mud, then this wave was a clear spring water without any impurities in it. There were also different tiers to Zenki: superior, intermediate and inferior. The higher the quality, the more clear it would be and the further one would be able to climb in the future. In the past, the Zenki he cultivated was murky and probably of inferior quality. The ones he was cultivating was so clear that you could see through it. Most probably, it was Zenki of superior quality. Didn't they say that if one wants to cultivate superior Zenki, they would require a god or sent cultivation technique? There were different tiers to a cultivation technique as well, namely God, Saint, Spirit, Phantom and Mortal in each tier. They were classified further into inferior, intermediate, superior and pinnacle. Based on rumors among cultivators, one would need at least a Saint cultivation technique in order to cultivate superior Zenki. Hongshan 9-Dan formula was the lowest mortal cultivation technique. So how could it cultivate Zenki of such quality? It is the Library of Heaven's Path. Zhang Xuan clenched his fist. He was still cultivating the Hongshan 9-Dan formula, but as he managed to avoid the mistakes recorded on it and followed the correct path upwards, he was able to gather superior Zenki. It seems that what is recorded on the Library of Heaven's Path is accurate. The Hongshan 9-Dan formula is indeed too far from perfection. If so, with the help of the Library of Heaven's Path, can it be possible for me to create a book of Saint or even God cultivation technique? Zhang Xuan's eyes twinkled. Chapter 15, Heaven's Path Divine Art. Needless to say, Hongshan Academy or even those top sects, might not even have God or Saint cultivation technique. Besides, even they have it, it was hidden deep inside the sect and normal people would be unable to obtain it. What he wanted to do was to create such a skill, so that his training would be more efficient so as to hasten the rate of the rise of his cultivation by leaps and bounds. I don't have any 4-Dan cultivation method. Let me go to the Teacher Compendium Pavilion to take a look. Practicing the Hongshan 9-Dan formula, the cultivator could only retrieve the secret manual for the next realm after breaking through their current realm. At this moment, he only had the cultivation method for 3-Dan. He had yet to see the one for 4-Dan. Walking out, the sun hadn't set for too long and there were still quite a few passerby on the road. The bright moonlight reflected on the surface of the pavement, dyeing it with a layer of silver. A few couples who had just tasted the forbidden fruit were snuggling under the tree as they whispered sweet nothings to one another. Even so, the surroundings have a serene atmosphere. Zhang Xuan didn't bother himself with these. Instead, he hastened his footsteps and soon, a giant pavilion appeared before him. The Compendium Pavilion was split into two main sections. Teacher and student. Within it lied the compendium of all kinds of secret manuals and cultivation techniques. It was one of the most important locations in the entire academy. Elder Mo. Walking to the entrance, he bowed to an elderly who was sitting at a proximity from the great door. Elder Mo was one of the guardians of the Compendium Pavilion. It was unknown what realm he had reached, but it was said that he was ranked among the top in the academy in terms of his strength. However, as he hadn't fought for many years, no one could tell his actual strength for sure. You're here. You have reached Fighter 4-Dan? Elder Mo looked over and stroked his sparse beard. It is just luck. Zhang Xuan didn't try to conceal the fact that he had reached Fighter 4-Dan. Good, train harder, the academy still needs young blood like you. Elder Mo nodded his head in satisfaction. Yes. Zhang Xuan didn't continue speaking and instead, lifted his leg to walk into the room. The moment he left, Elder Mo shook his head and lamented. He is a good child, just that he is lacking a little in talent and is slightly too slow in his cultivation. Other cultivators took around 2 years to break through Fighter 3-Dan, whereas Zhang Xuan took a whole 3 years to do so. His talent was indeed subpar. Upon reaching Fighter 4-Dan, if he were to train properly, he should still be able to become an average teacher. Just that. I hope he doesn't score too badly for his teacher qualification examination the next time. After muttering for a bit, Elder Mo didn't go on any further and shut his eyes once more. Zhang Xuan was one of the more polite ones among the numerous young teachers. He didn't really like him, but neither did he dislike him. It was just that he found it lamentable for him to be lacking in talent. Oblivious to the mutterings of Elder Mo, Zhang Xuan walked into the Compendium Pavilion. Although the Hongshan Academy's Compendium Pavilion was of significant size, nowhere paling in comparison to the working location of his previous life, it was still much smaller than the Library of Heaven's Path in his mind. The two weren't even on the same level. He walked quickly to the cultivation technique section and to the fourth row of it. Indeed, the Hongshan 9-Dan formula 4-Dan cultivation technique was in here. Reaching out to grab it, he casually flipped through it. A similar secret manual appeared in his mind. Taking a look, it was around the same as the one for 3-Dan. There were more than 1,000 flaws. There are other secret manuals here as well. Let me take a look at them as well. After the prior experience with breaking through, Zhang Xuan didn't focus on the flaws in it and instead looked towards the bookshelf before him. On the bookshelf of the fourth row, there was an amazing amount of different kinds of cultivation technique manuals. They were all cultivation techniques for 4-Dan and there were quite plenty of notes and explanations in them left behind by predecessors. Just by a rough look, there were around a few thousand of them. If it was someone else, their eyes would definitely blur from the sight. After all, there were so many books with countless notes left in them. Furthermore, some of the theories for the cultivation techniques are at ends with each other, so it was hard to gauge whether which one was the right one. If one were to randomly cultivate without knowing better, it was possible for them to go berserk. However, Zhang Xuan was different. Possessing the Library of Heaven's Path, he was capable of telling which one was the right one. He didn't hesitate to grab a book and flip through it. A similar book appeared in his mind. Zhang Xuan didn't stop and picked up the next one. He wasn't browsing through them nor picking them, rather, he was trying to increase the number of books in the Library of Heaven's Path, so that he could derive a more precise cultivation method. Hualala. The sound of flipping pages filled the entire room. Oh, equal impatient and unrealistic. Hearing those words, Elder Mo frowned. Since Zhang Xuan had already chosen to cultivate in the Hongshan 9-Dan formula, then he shouldn't think about any other skills. He should make use of the time to copy the formula for the 4-Dan, so that he could analyze it and start training. Although it was possible to make use the strengths of others to make up for the flaws of one, the more miscellaneous knowledge one read, the easier it was for one to get impatient and rash in the end. It was a small thing if he achieved nothing in the end. If things go wrong, it was very possible for him to go berserk and ruin his cultivation. 30 years ago, a talented genius blessed with great talents who thought he was much greater than others insisted on looking through the various cultivation techniques to create an ultimate one tailored to him. In the end, due to reading too many manuals, he became uncertain of the route he should walk on and his cultivation went berserk. As an individual, he became insane as well. Being greedy would cause indigestion. This was the absolute truth and reality. For him to take 3 years to break through Zenki realm, his talent was apparent. With such talent, he should just obediently cultivate 4 Dan of Hongshan 9 Dan formula, yet he chose to flip through other manuals. Was he just trying to seek for something thrilling? With one look, one could tell he was an unrealistic fellow. The good impression that he held towards Zhang Xuan disappeared without a trace, putting on a show just to obtain the fleeting praises of the crowd. After a cold harumph, he realized that Zhang Xuan was just casually flipping through without taking a careful look at the Meldomo's eyebrows knitted even closer together, and he felt a little disgusted with him. If one were to study those manual closer, even though they were being unrealistic, they would still obtain some knowledge on them. However, this fellow simply and casually flipped through it, and given the speed he flipped at, even Eldermo himself was unable to look through the contents properly. If so, what could a lad who had just reached Fighter 4 Dan see? Now, he was truly putting on a show to obtain the fleeting praises of the crowd. The Academy's culture is really degenerating, getting worse with each passing generation. After those words, he shut his eyes, refusing to bother with this unrealistic fellow anymore. I'm done. His pace of browsing was extremely fast. He was able to finish flipping through a normal manual in just 1 or 2 breaths. In 2 hours, he finished browsing through all of the cultivation manuals, and thousands of identical books had appeared in the library at Heaven's Path. Time to return to assess them. Knowing that his aim had been achieved, he smiled and walked towards the outside without hesitation. You aren't going to copy any notes? Seeing him leaving empty-handed, Eldermo couldn't resist asking. Even if he is unrealistic, he should at least copy the secret manual, so that he can analyze it after returning to his living quarters. Coming and leaving empty-handed. Are you coming here to play? It's okay, I am actually just taking a casual look. Unsure about what the other party was thinking about, Zhang Xuan smiled and took his leave. Taking a casual look? Frivolous. The Academy should punish this fellow. How can such a frivolous person be a teacher? Eldermo waved his hand in anger. Cultivation manuals were the core of every cultivator, and every cultivator should hold some respect towards them. However, this fellow only came to take a look and returned back after casually flipping through them. His behavior was unacceptable. Looks like he should have a talk with the principal to deal with these teachers who were sullying the culture of the Academy. Returning back to his living quarters, Zhang Xuan took out pen and papers and flipped through the Hongshan 9 Dan Formula 4 Dan manual to copy down the correct portions of it. Then, he took out another book and copied down the correct portions as well. After flipping through a few of them, Zhang Xuan rubbed his temples. It was actually quite troublesome and tiring to flip through a few thousand books like that. It wasn't as simple as he thought it would be. Just when he was thinking about how he could hasten his pace, his mind suddenly jolted again. The thousands of book that was just compiled in the library of Heaven's Path crumpled and slowly merged as one. Wang. The few thousand books merged together completely with a crisp sound to form a single book. There wasn't any name on the book. Zhang Xuan casually flipped through it. This is the compilation of the correct routes in the few thousand secret manuals? After taking a look at it, Zhang Xuan's face flushed red from excitement. Previously, he was still troubled by how he could find the correct route out of a few thousand of books. It would have been an arduous task, taking a long period of time. Never in his dreams would he expect that the library would compile it automatically. This book, there isn't a single flaw in it. The nameless book was the compilation of all of the correct cultivation route, and there wasn't a single flaw in it. The contents of it were no longer Hongshan 9 Dan formula or any one of the individual manual that was compiled into it. It could be said to be something no one had ever seen before, since it is the correct method chosen and compiled by the library of Heaven's Path. Let's call it Heaven's Path Divine Art. A thought flashed through his mind and he decided on the name of the nameless manual. Wang. As though sensing his thoughts, the empty cover trembled and 4 words appeared on it. Heaven's Path Divine Art. Chapter 16, Cleansing Muscles and Bones. Let me give it a try. After obtaining a cultivation technique without any flaws, Zhang Xuan didn't hesitate to follow the method recorded in the Heaven's Path Divine Art and starts to meditate. The pores on his body widened as he absorbed spirit energy from the air into his body. Fighter 4 Dan, 1 Dan Juxi, 2 Dan Danshan, 3 Dan Zenki, 4 Dan Pigam, Juxi Realm. Cultivators would learn innate breathing and sensing of spirit in the air. Also, they would gain the ability to look into their body and control the flow of spirit energy in their body with their mind. Danshan Realm, the opening up of the cultivator's Danshan to allow it to hold spirit energy as well as to reform his body, turning a normal human into a true fighter. Zenki Realm. The gathering of the spirit energy in the Danshan to create Zenki. Pig Realm. The Zenki-filled Danshan would overflow and enrich one's body, causing the cultivator's physical body to become powerful. The capabilities of their organs would also be strengthened, thus turning them into true experts. The first 3 Dans of a fighter were the building of foundations. Only at the 4 Dan did the result of one's cultivation truly reflected on one's body, causing one to stray away from illnesses and become stronger. The cultivation method of Hongshan 9 Dan manual was to make use of the Zenki overflowing from the Danshan to nourish one's body, thus reforming and tempering one's bones, muscles, tendons and skin. However, the Heaven's Path Divine Art was different. It used the spirit energy from the surrounding to nourish one's body while having the Zenki in one's body overflow to the other parts of the body at the same time. Gyugagu. The stream of spirit energy flowed through his veins towards his entire body. The Zenki would mend and fill up the incomplete parts as it flowed through his veins. Jizzy. Jizzy. It didn't take long for the infusion of both spirit energy and Zenki to strengthen his bones and muscles. It felt as though it had been tempered with concentrated fire as it turned clear, emitting a warm glow. Boom. After the Zenki circulated around his body for an unknown number of times, his body suddenly jolted and he felt as though he had broken through a certain bottleneck. A surge of relaxation gushed through his body. Previously, his body felt as though it had been bound by some shackles, but now, his entire body felt light and he had perfect control over every single motion of his. It felt as though he had broken through his cocoon to be reborn as a butterfly. Fighter 4 Dan Pigarelm. I have finished cultivating in this realm. Opening his eyes, Zhang Zuan was still in a state of disbelief. The sign of breaking through the Pig realm was the destruction of the shackles of one's body, allowing one to ascend into greater heights. How long had he been training? 2 hours? 4 hours? Pungent. Curious, he looked at his body and realized that there was a layer of filth on the surface of his skin. Pig realm was the nourishment of one's body using Zenki, expelling the impurities within one's body and cleansing one's muscles and bones, thus reforming their body. From birth, humans would ingest all kinds of food for survival. As a result, they would accumulate more and more impurities in their body in the Pig realm. Through the nourishment of Zenki, one cleansed their body of impurities and only then were they able to break through the shackles of their body and return back to nature. I have long heard of the Pig realm, but I have never seen anyone who can expel so much impurities. Smelling the pungent smell from his body, Zhang Zuan couldn't take it anymore. He grabbed a pail and cleaned himself while muttering under his breath. Fighter 4 Dan Pig realm was the cleansing of one's muscles and bones. It was already not bad for one to strengthen their body just by a small bit in one sitting. He had never heard of a person expelling so much impurities that their entire body would stink from it. Very quickly, he finished cleaning himself. At this moment, Zhang Zuan suddenly realized that his body was as clear as a jade and as smooth as a mirror. All of the scars which he accumulated from his previous training sessions have disappeared without a trace right now. He was just like a newborn infant, perhaps even smoother than a newborn infant. My Zenki, surprised by the changes in his body, his attention turned to his danshin. His entire body trembled. The murky Zenki that was in his danshin previously had turned to become as clear and water, and it was emitting refreshing fragrance. Without a doubt, it was definitely superior Zenki. Not only is my body enhanced, even the quality of my Zenki has improved. This Heaven's Path divine art is too powerful. Zhang Zuan was taken aback. To break through Pig realm, others have to continually nourish their body for at least a few years. However, he took less than 4 hours to break through the realm directly. Not only so, the quality of his Zenki had also been refined. Exactly what kind of secret manual had the Library of Heaven's Path created? This was way too powerful. Let me test my strength. Upon breaking through Pig realm, one would reach Fighter 5 Dan Dingla. The moment a cultivator steps into this realm, they will possess 1 ding of strength. He walked over to the strength measuring rock pillar, which was just a few dozen meters away from the dormitory. This kind of strength measuring rock pillar could be found around the academy so as to allow the students to measure their strength anytime and anywhere. Upon reaching Fighter 5 Dan Dinglai, one would possess 1 ding of strength, which was around 1,000 kilograms. This kind of strength already exceeded the limits of an ordinary human and was on par with horses and bulls. After practicing the Heaven's Path divine art, Zhang Zuan's body had been reformed and he had broken through the Pig realm. This was an opportunity for him to test how much strength the possessed. Would it be like in the rumors, that he would possess 1 ding of strength? Gathering and controlling his breath, the sole of the feet clutched onto the ground suddenly. His knees sprang forth and his entire body immediately took on the shape of a giant bow while his arm burst forth from him like an arrow. Peng. His fist struck on the stone pillar and a glint of light flowed on it. 5 ding. A number appeared on it. How is this possible? Zhang Zuan narrowed his eyes and a dumbfounded look covered his entire face. Is this for it? For a normal Dinglai primary stage, one would possess 1 ding of strength in the intermediate stage. One would possess 2 ding of strength in the advanced stage, 3 ding of strength and in the pinnacle, 4 ding of strength. Yet, despite barely breaking through the Pig realm to Dinglai realm, he actually possessed 5 ding of strength. What was going on? Wasn't this too exaggerated? It must be due to the nourishment of my body by the Heaven's Path divine art and the superior Zenki in my body. After a short moment, Zhang Zuan recovered from the shock and infers. He was very clear that he wasn't a genius. The only explanation for it was the Heaven's Path divine art which he had just cultivated with. Not only did this cultivation technique tempered and reformed his physical body, and cleansed his Zenki, raising it to superior quality, it also increased his strength significantly, thus granting him the strength beyond that of Dinglai pinnacle expert despite just reaching the Dinglai realm. Fearsome. There are only a few esteemed teacher in the academy who reached Fighter 5 Dan. In the academy, only some of the higher-level teachers possessed the strength of a Fighter 5 Dan Dinglai realm. People like Cao Sung and him could never hope to reach such heights. Now that I have reached this level, I should go and look for the cultivation technique for 5 Dan. While his strength soared rapidly, a problem arose. The multitude of 4 Dan cultivation techniques that he flipped through in the teacher compendium pavilion previously were useless. Now if he wanted to continue cultivating, he had to look for 5 Dan cultivation techniques. Right now, it isn't too late. The teacher compendium pavilion shouldn't be closed yet. Scratching his head, Zhang Zuan walked over the compendium pavilion once more. In order to prevent people from getting greedy and hasty in their training, the academy imposed a rule that one could only view cultivation techniques that corresponded to the level of their cultivation. It didn't take long for Zhang Zuan to arrive at the compendium pavilion once more. Why are you here again? Seeing that it's the same guy from a moment ago, the custodian, Elder Mo, frowned. This impractical fellow just left the pavilion not long ago. Why was he back again? Elder Mo, I would like to view the cultivation technique for 5 Dan. Zhang Zuan was a little awkward. He couldn't possibly say that he broke through after leaving for just a short moment. If he were to say that, the other fellow would either kill him or kidnap him to examine him like a lab rat. There wasn't much of a change in Zenki between Pig realm and Dinglai realm as long he didn't manipulate his Zenki. It was difficult for even experts to tell the difference. Elder Mo might be strong, but it was inconceivable to him that this youth might have broken to greater heights in the short moment he was gone. 5 Dan cultivation technique? What do you want it for? Elder Mo's face darkened. His final sliver of appreciation towards his fellow disappeared. He didn't copy any notes on the 4 Dan cultivation technique and didn't try to cultivate it yet. He was back now to look at the 5 Dan. What kind of joke was this? Elder Mo, it is like this today. I accepted a student and his parent asked me some questions about 5-dan cultivation. I was unable to answer it, causing him to look down on me. Thus I would like to take a look and derive an answer to it. This way, I would be able to deal with these questions in the future. Zhang Xuan had already thought of an excuse beforehand. Some parents are indeed troublesome to deal with. Hearing this explanation, Elder Mo nodded his head with a solemn expression. He said, "You can take a look, but do not cultivate them by any means. If you try to cultivate 5-dan without even breaking through 4-dan, even deities would be unable to save you when you go berserk." "Yes, I understand that." Zhang Xuan hurriedly replied. "All right, enter." Elder Mo waved his hand and closed his eyes. The 5-dan cultivation technique are on the very last row. "Yes." Zhang Xuan hurriedly entered. Hypocritical. Vain. After entering, Elder Mo added 2 more words to his evaluation of Zhang Xuan. Chapter 17, Assassination. So what if the parents ask about it? You are the lowest level teacher. It is normal that you can't answer their questions. So, in order to put on a show, you specially came here to view the 5-dan cultivation technique. If this isn't being hypocritical and vain, then what is? Tomorrow, I will look for the principal and have this unrealistic fellow expelled. Scoffing coldly in his heart, Old Mo's mind was resolute. Leaving such a vain fellow who doesn't cultivate properly in the academy will just sully the culture of the academy. Zhang Xuan didn't know that the 2 meetings with Elder Mo have placed him in the expulsion list of the latter. If he were to know, he would have no idea whether he should burst into laughter or weep in tears. Those words that he said were only excuses. In reality, his cultivation had reached such a level. He couldn't possibly stop training due to the lack of cultivation technique. Very quickly, he found the very last row of the cultivation techniques section. Even the most famous and powerful teacher in the academy was Fighter 5-dan. The moment one broke through into the 6-dan Pixu realm, they would automatically become an elder in the academy. This was only the teacher compendium pavilion, so there weren't any records on the 6-dan cultivation techniques. Thus, the 5-dan cultivation techniques were placed on the very last shelf. There are significantly less 5-dan manuals than 4-dan. There were around 2,000 to 3,000 cultivation technique secret manuals on the 4-dan, whereas there were only 1,000 on the 5-dan. However, it was also a natural occurrence when one thought about it. No matter what it was, the higher one climbed, the scarcer the resources. Although the academy had been present for a long time, there were definitely significantly less 5-dan than 4-dan in its entire history. As a result, the cultivation techniques and notes they left behind would be fewer as well. Shaking his head, he decided not to contemplate over such matters. Zhang Xuan casually took out a book and flipped through it. Around an hour later, the 1,000 cultivation technique secret manuals had been browsed through and the Library of Heaven's Path had compiled corresponding books to the secret manuals. After receiving what he wanted, Zhang Xuan smiled faintly and bade Elder Mo farewell before walking into the distance. Seeing how he was randomly flipping and viewing the books, not even stopping in the midst of it, Elder Mo couldn't help but chastise him yet again in his mind. Returning back to his living quarters, Zhang Xuan followed what he did previously and searched for the correct phrases and paragraphs within the 1,000 books. As he expected, not too long later, the library compiled the 1,000 books into a single one. This time, the book wasn't nameless and the 4 big words Heaven's Path Divine Art was written on it. He started to cultivate again. Fighter 5-dan Dinglai realm was an extension of the Piga realm. The purpose of this realm was simple. It was to temper the Zenki of the cultivator to his body. The difference in strength between each stage in Dinglai realm was mainly due to the level of compatibility between one's Zenki and their body. The greater their compatibility, the more strength one was able to exert. Reading the cultivation method for the Dinglai realm in the Heaven's Path Divine Art, Zhang Xuan focused his attention. He carefully controlled the crystal clear Zenki in his dungeon to slowly flow in his body, going at a fixed rhythm to allow it to merge completely with his body. The Heaven's Path Divine Art was indeed worthy of being a cultivation technique compiled by the advantages of over a few thousand secret manuals. The efficiency of the cultivation method was indeed one to behold. His Zenki and muscles swiftly merged together as one. The strength of his body and the compatibility of his Zenki soared up exponentially. Dinglai realm primary stage. Dinglai realm intermediate stage. Dinglai realm advanced stage. Dinglai realm pinnacle. Boom. After 4 hours, his body jolted again. Zhang Xuan reopened his eyes. His eyes were filled with disbelief. This Fighter 5-dan pinnacle? Initially, he thought he would take a long period cultivating in 5-dan. Never in his dreams would he possibly imagine that he could reach the pinnacle in 4 hours through the Heaven's Path Divine Art. To his previous self, cultivation was as difficult as trying to ascend the heavens, yet, to Zhang Xuan who was practicing the Heaven's Path Divine Art, it was as easy as eating and drinking. Just by half a night worth of effort, he rose from Fighter 3-dan Zenki realm to Fighter 5-dan Dinglai realm pinnacle. This was too exaggerated. Furthermore, if it wasn't for the fact that he didn't know the cultivation method for 6-dan, unaware of which acupoint he should break through, he might have already successfully broken through to become a 6-dan Pixu realm expert. In 6-dan Pixu realm, one would open up all of the blocked acupoints in their body. For every acupoint broken through, one's Zenki would become richer and one's price will rise. It was said that there are 108 acupoints in the human body. However, only 72 of these could be opened, and there was an order to opening it. Everyone's body was different. Thus everyone would require a different sequence in breaking through each of them to obtain the best results out of it. If one was unable to find the correct sequence, they could very possibly end up only opening 3 to 4 acupoints and be stuck there for the rest of their lives. This was just like cleaning the silt by a river. It had to be cleaned gradually from the upper stream to the lower stream. If one were to start at the center and clean towards the upper and lower stream, not only would the river not be cleaned thoroughly, it might even result in a blockage, causing one to be unable to progress further. The same logic went for breaking through one's acupoints as well. If one didn't find the ideal sequence, the other acupoints might get blocked, and for the rest of their lives, they would be unable to open it. Thus, without a cultivation technique, Zhang Xuan didn't dare to try to cultivate further. However, He wasn't anxious. It was already unheard of to break through 2 great realms in a single night. He was already very satisfied with the results. Unless required, it is best for me to not to reveal my level of cultivation. As a transcender, he had read many books and watched many shows. He knew that possessing a treasure itself was a crime. He was the worst teacher in the entire academy, yet, in a night, he suddenly gained the strength of a fighter 5 Dan Pinnacle. If others were to find out, wouldn't they all rush to him? Thus, it was best for him to not tell anyone about him reaching Dinglai Realm Pinnacle. The more confidential it was, the better it was for him. Let me see how much strength would I hold this time. After making a decision, Zhang Xuan walked over to the strength measuring rock pillar. While other people only possessed 1 ding of strength in their Dinglai primary stage, he possessed 5 ding. If so, how much strength would he hold now that he had reached the pinnacle? Peng. Light flowed through the rock pillar and numbers appeared on it. 8 ding. 8 ding of strength. That is almost the strength of a Pixie Realm expert who has opened up 4 Aku points. Zhang Xuan's eyes lit up. A normal Dinglai Pinnacle cultivator would possess 4 ding of strength, after which, for each Aku point they broke through, their strength would increase by 1 ding. Despite just being at Dinglai Pinnacle, he possessed the strength of 8 ding, putting him on the same level as an expert who had broken through 4 Aku points, as expected of the Heaven's Path Divine Art. Incredible. Zhang Xuan was quite happy after training for such a long period of time. He intended to find something to eat then go to sleep. However, his ears suddenly twitched. Why would someone be here at such a time? Zhang Xuan frowned. Due to an advancement in his cultivation, his hearing and sight have improved tremendously. He was able to clearly perceive the sound of someone hiding somewhere not too far from where he was, staring fixedly at his living quarters. Looks like he is surveying my room. He probably has yet to detect my presence. At this moment, Zhang Xuan wasn't at his room but behind a strength measuring rock pillar, which was a distance away from the dormitory. After measuring his strength, he had been suppressing his breathing. Thus the other party had yet to notice his presence. Let's see who's the one finding trouble with me. He didn't expect that someone would want to deal with him right after he was done cultivating. The doubts in his mind grew, rummaging through the memories of his previous self. Although he didn't have much accomplishment, there hadn't been a scenario where someone sneaked onto in the night to deal with him. No matter who he is, I mustn't let him identify me. Just when he was about to meet the other party, a thought suddenly flashed through his mind. The entire academy knew that he is a fighter 3 Dan Zenki Realm Crash. If he were to appear at this moment as a 5 Dan Pinnacle, the other party would definitely be scared to death. Furthermore, if the news were to spread out, there would surely be quite a few persons who would look into him. Thus, no matter who the other party was, Zhang Xuan mustn't allow him to identify him. At this moment, he suddenly recalled the numerous movies he had watched back in his previous life. Thus, he tore away a fabric from his sleeves and covered his face. After finishing with his preparations, making use of the darkness of the night, Zhang Xuan gradually crept towards the other party with light footsteps. Although he had just broken through and he had never studied any footwork, the cultivation technique he was training with was the Heaven's Path Divine Art, which granted him superb control over his body. Not to mention, he was also very familiar with his surroundings, so the other party didn't notice him even when he was just 10 meters behind him. At such a proximity, he could clearly see the black suit donned by the other party. His face was also covered, so it was impossible for him to make out his identity as well. Lad, if you must blame it for your daring guts to dare to lay your hands on our young mistress. Hiding behind a large tree, Zhang Xuan stared at the silhouette before him as the mutterings of the latter vaguely drifted to his ears. That voice sounds familiar. Zhang Xuan's eyebrows knitted tightly together. Zhang Xuan was sure that he had heard this voice before. However, he had difficulty recalling exactly when and where he heard it. Just as he was trying his best to recall whether it is the memory of his previous self or after he had transcended, the silhouette before him flickered and gradually moved towards his dormitory at the same time. With a flick of his wrist, a cold gleam shone and a sharp dagger appeared on his palm. Chapter 18, Scammed. You want to kill me? Seeing the other party whipping out a knife, Zhang Xuan raised his eyebrows. It was fortunate that he had been cultivating and not sleeping, otherwise, when the other party approached him silently like this, wouldn't he be killed for sure? Let me first ascertain who this fellow is. Zhang Xuan knew that conducting this kind of night assault would mean that he was not an individual. Perhaps there could even be an organization behind him if he didn't accurately identify the one trying to murder him. Even if he were to kill this assassin, there might be more coming for his life in the future if he didn't dig out the organization behind the assassination. He wouldn't have to dream of sleeping peacefully anymore. Who is it? Just when Zhang Xuan was pondering how he should force the man before him to confess the organization backing him, he heard a hushed voice. Unknowingly, the black-clothed man grasping the dagger was already standing at proximity to him. Zhang Xuan had never tracked anyone before. Upon seeing the other party whip out a dagger, he got nervous for a moment and leaked out his breath, causing the other party to notice his presence. To be noticed so quickly, Zhang Xuan frowned just when he was about to rush forward to duel with the man before him. A thought flashed through his mind and a brilliant idea popped out. I am here to kill Zhang Xuan, that useless teacher. Who are you? Suppressing his tone so as to not be identified, Zhang Xuan declared. Since the other party was here to kill him, he would be able to confuse him by saying that he was here for the same purpose. You're here to kill him? The black-clothed man was taken aback. However, looking at how Zhang Xuan concealed his face and his sneaky attitude, he couldn't help but trust his words slightly. Indeed, the academy's worst teacher will only bring harm to the students if left alone. Zhang Xuan couldn't help but turn red upon talking about himself. Oh, then you do it. I will help you. Keep a lookout. The black-clothed man said. King. An uncomprehending look appeared on Zhang Xuan. He tried to push the responsibility to him. I think it would be better for you to do it anyway. We are here for the same motive, so it doesn't matter who does it. You do it. Actually, I have no intentions of killing him. I only wanted to punish him. However, if he were to die, that would be for the best. The black-clothed man urged him on. Punish him? Zhang Zuan was a little confused. Punish him then? Why was he holding a dagger? He couldn't resist asking, how do you want to punish him? For that fellow dares to do something disrespectful to our young mistress. I intend to chop off his thing and turn him into a eunuch. The black-clothed man proclaimed furiously. Hearing those words filled with vile intentions, Zhang Zuan could only feel a breeze at his crotch and shivered unconsciously in fear. The hell? If I were to sleep peacefully tonight, I would probably be qualified to serve the emperor after this. Exclamation mark. Who the hell are you, for you to be so vicious? Disrespectful to your young mistress? Zhang Zuan tried to recall the memories of his previous self and after his reincarnation, but he didn't seem to have gotten into any physical relationships with any young mistresses. That Zhang Zuan, I have only heard that he is unqualified as a teacher. I have never heard of him bullying females. What is this about? Zhang Zuan couldn't resist asking. That fellow is an animal with a human skin. What teacher? He is a beast. Our young mistress, forget it. The more I think about it, the more furious I get. Untold rage could be felt from the suppressed voice of the black-clothed man. Zhang Zuan could only see stars. So what the hell is it about, for you to insult me as a beast? What did I do to your young mistress? Besides that, who the hell is your young mistress? It is one thing if she is pretty, but if she is ugly, isn't it too much for such a reputation to be forced on me? Why do you want to kill him? After his insults, the black-clothed man looked over. Me? Zhang Zuan didn't expect that the other party would question him. He was stunned for a moment before clenching his jaw and answering. I can't accept his actions of bullying women. You know that he bullies women? Who did he bully? The black-clothed man was alarmed. Zhang Zuan harumphed and said, there is no reason for me to answer your questions. That is true since we both have the same goals in mind. You go first. Seeing that the other party was unwilling to reveal anything, although there were doubts in his mind, he chose to ask no further and waved his hand to gesture Zhang Zuan to go ahead. It would be better if you go first. If I were to strike first, he would be dead before you can castrate him. It would be better for you to castrate him first before I kill him. Zhang Zuan replied. But the black-clothed man started to hesitate. He looked at Zhang Zuan in doubt. He started to get suspicious. How could it be possible for such a coincidence to occur? Just when he intended to castrate Zhang Zuan, another person appeared to assassinate him? If it wasn't for his fear of the strength of the other party, he would have struck him unconscious by now. Why? You don't trust me? If I don't want to kill him, why would I sneak here in the middle of the night? Noticing his doubts, Zhang Zuan tried to dispel them. Hearing those words, the black-clothed man hesitated for a moment before nodding his head in agreement. That's true, it is already late at night. If the masked man isn't here to kill Zhang Zuan, why would he be here for? It isn't because I don't trust you since our goals align with one another. Let's go together. The black-clothed man replied after pondering for a moment. He was still a little suspicious of the fellow in front of him. You are still way too careful. Rest easy. I have basic principles as a human. However, since you do not trust me, Zhang Zuan didn't drag on the conversation and gestured. Let's go together. After which, he charged forward. Fighter 5 Dan Pinnacle. Seeing his movement, the black-clothed man instantly identified his level of cultivation. He exerted his King Kong and followed closely behind. Seeing the black-clothed man following behind him, Zhang Zuan immediately turned around to take a look. Boom. The Library of Heaven's Path jolted and a book appeared. The skill the other party exerted to follow him was equal to executing a battle technique as long as one were to use a skill. The Library of Heaven's Path would be able to compile a book on his flaws and thus, his background would be revealed. Zhang Zuan glanced at the book. He only saw two words Yao Han written on the cover. This name sounds so familiar. Where have I heard of it? Zhang Zuan stared at the front cover for a moment before flipping over to the first page. Yao Han, the butler of Bai City Lord Resident Fighter 6 Dan Pixu Primary Stage. 8 Taku points opened. It's him? Seeing the words Bai City, Zhang Zuan immediately recalled the identity of the man before him. Wasn't this the butler from Bai City who rushed over to threaten him when he accepted Zhao Ya as his student? No wonder his voice and name sounds so familiar. Just that. This means that the young mistress that he mentioned refers to Zhao Ya. What did I do to her for you to make the journey here just to castrate me? To dare malign me even though you are stronger than me? I must teach you a lesson. The more he thought about it, the angrier he got. If it was something his previous self did, since he had transcended over to take his place, even though he would feel wronged, he would admit it. However, the crux was that he didn't do anything. For Yao Han to label him with this crime when he did nothing, he was simply too vile. As such thoughts raced through his mind, he continued to glance through the list. Cultivation technique, white jade circulation technique. Battle techniques, mystical diagram palm, expert, mystical diagram fist, expert, flaws, 16 aspects. No one, his Mingman is at his bottoms and his skills are unable to guard against attacks directed at the point. No 2 no 3. Just as how it did previously, the book recorded all the flaws on this fellow. Having broken through 8 Aku points, this meant his current strength is at 12 ding. If Zhang Zuan were to try to match him in a direct combat, he would definitely not be a match for him. However, so what if you are in Pixie realm? So what if you possess 12 ding of strength? If I don't teach you a lesson today, I wouldn't be called Zhang Zuan. Who? At this point, Zhang Zuan stopped abruptly. What's wrong? Seeing Zhang Zuan stopping abruptly, the black-clothed man asked with a confused look. Look, an UFO. Zhang Zuan casually pointed. UFO? What is an UFO? The black-clothed man was taken aback and hurriedly turned around to take a look. This action revealed the Mingman on his bottom to Zhang Zuan. Incomprehension plagued Yao Han. He knew of butterfly, ultimatum and spy. However, what exactly was an UFO? Go to hell. What Zhang Zuan had been waiting for was this opportunity. Without any hesitation whatsoever, he sent a kick filled with his wrath towards his bottom. Peng. Before the black-clothed man Yao Han could react, his Mingman was kicked on. He flew forward and crashed head-on with a boulder not too far away. Blood trickled down from the wound on his head. Since you are here to castrate me, should I castrate you right now? The more he thought about it, the angrier he got. Zhang Xuan rushed forward and sat on the other party's body. He sent a couple of fists onto his face. What peaks you, realm expert? What 12-ding expert? They are strong? If you were to find their Mingmen and exploit their flaws, an unexpected assault will still lead to their deaths. Apparently, Yao Han didn't expect the fellow who wanted to teach Zhang Xuan a lesson along with him would suddenly attack him frenziedly. What's worse, his Mingman was struck, causing his entire body to go stiff. He couldn't retaliate even if he wanted to. His body shivered from anger. Didn't we agree to deal with Zhang Xuan together? The heck? Where is your trust? Where are your basic principles as a human? Besides, no matter what, you are a fighter 5 standing like pinnacle master, an expert among experts. You should have some demeanor even in the midst of a battle to shamelessly lie to me and launch a secret assault before riding on my face. What about battle techniques? What about crossing blows? What about your cultivation technique? Even gangsters on the street don't fight this way. He only felt wave after wave of pain on his face. Yao Han was about to go insane. At this moment, he finally knew that he had been scammed by the masked man. Furthermore, it was the worst kind of scams. Note, King Gong, literally translated as the art of lightweight. It refers to footwork which allows one to tread lightly, increasing one's jumping ability, running speed and dodging skills. Chapter 19, Framing. After a violent thrashing, Zhang Xuan finally felt the rage in his heart subsiding slightly. Lowering his head to take a look, Yao Han's mask had already fallen off in the midst of the bashing and his face was warped from taking his hits. Probably, even his own mother would be unable to recognize him in his current state. King. Now that anger was no longer clouding his mind, Zhang Xuan immediately grasped his current situation. This fellow is the butler of Bai City Lord, as well as the uncle of my disciple. It is still okay for me to teach him a lesson, but I should not kill him by any means. No matter what, this fellow was still Zhao Yao's uncle Yao. If Zhang Xuan were to really kill him, wouldn't the disciple he just admitted go to waste? There would surely be zero possibility for reconciliation if that were to happen. Besides, Bai City was reputed as the third biggest city in Tanxuan Kingdom. To be able to become the city lord of such a city, Zhao Yao's father should be rather powerful and holds great influence. If his butler was killed, if he chose to pursue this matter, it might be possible for him to investigate onto himself. If so, he would be in deep trouble. Being a newcomer in this world, he had yet to create a firm foothold for him to stand on, so it was best for him to keep a low profile. I mustn't let me become suspicious of me. The thought flashed through his mind. Since Yao Han couldn't be killed, then Zhang Xuan have to let him go alive for him to get beaten. Him in the midst of an assault against Zhang Xuan would definitely be the first person he would be suspicious of. Oh right, I have the perfect scapegoat for this. If he didn't come looking for trouble today, I wouldn't have thought of him. A person flashed through Zhang Xuan's mind. That person was the man who was beside Shen Bairu earlier today, the one who kept mocking him, Shang Bin. Anyway, that fellow was the grandson of Elder Shang Chen. If Zhang Xuan were to push the blame to him, Yao Han wouldn't dare to take revenge even if he wanted to. In fact, it would be better if Yao Han were to take revenge. The two of them would then bite viciously onto one another. At this point, Zhang Xuan stared at the distorted face of Yao Han and deepened his voice. I have a grudge with Zhang Xuan. Earlier today, he got on my nerves and so, I intended to teach him a lesson in the night. However, if he were to be castrated by you, Bai Shi would definitely suspect that I am the one who did it and a misunderstanding would arise between us. Blame this all on the fact that you met me today, as well as your untimely arrival. Only now did Yao Han know why he was thrashed. He wanted to retort, but his mouth was swollen like a pair of sausages, making it impossible for him to talk. Scram. Seeing that the other party has comprehended his words, Zhang Xuan didn't continue speaking. He stood up and kicked Yao Han's body a dozen meters away. Damn it. Hurling vulgarities towards the other party in his mind, Yao Han knew that he was in a disadvantageous situation today. Gritting his teeth, he turned away and left. At the same time, he carved the two main characteristics of the attacker onto his mind. Firstly, the person who beat him up had an encounter with Zhang Xuan earlier in the day and was incensed by his words or actions. Secondly, the relationship between him and Zhang Xuan should be love rivals. The woman who they were pursuing had a Bai in her name. As long as he remembered these two distinctive features, it was an easy task for him to find out who the fellow who laid his hands on him was. Only after seeing Yao Han disappear into the distance did Zhang Xuan heave a sigh of relief. He patted away the dirt on his clothes and returned back to the dormitory. This event was a great fright to him. If he didn't stay up to cultivate tonight, it would be hard to tell what would have happened. However, at least the danger was averted temporarily. The key to survival in this world: power. Sitting on the bed in his dormitory, Zhang Xuan muttered to himself. If his cultivation didn't soar today, even if he knew Yao Han's weaknesses, he wouldn't have been a match for him. The one to suffer in the end would be him. Thus, the urgent matter at hand was for him to swiftly raise his strength. The stronger he was, the better it was. He slowly drifted into the world of dream with his mind filled with sentimentality. The next day, Zhang Xuan woke up the moment the sky lit up. Although he had barely slept for 2 hours, not to mention how hard he had worked the previous night, he still felt refreshed without the slightest fatigue. Time to start lessons, he muttered as he put on his clothes, after which, he walked to his classroom with large strides. It didn't take long for him to arrive at his classroom. The moment he pushed the door open, a plump youth welcomed him enthusiastically. Zhang Loshi, you are here. Look, I have already finished cleaning up the room. He was the final student Zhang Xuan accepted yesterday, the fatty Yuan Tao. Zhang Xuan didn't expect that this fellow would be the first to arrive, given how he threatened him yesterday. Furthermore, he even cleaned the classroom spick and span. Not bad. Zhang Xuan nodded his head in approval. Since teacher said that I did not bad, is there any reward for my effort? like some martial art or cultivation technique and such. You can casually reward me with 3 or 5 of them. Hearing Zhang Xuan's acknowledgement, a wide smile appeared on Fatty's face. This fellow was the type who would go too far when you give him some leeway. Wait by the side first. I will start the lesson after the other students arrive. Zhang Xuan gestured. The first to arrive was Fatty unexpectedly. The second to arrive was the student whom he won from the bet, Liu Yang. However, Liu Yang's attitude wasn't as good as Fatty's. Indignation spelled on his face as he gazed at Zhang Xuan with a look of contempt. In his opinion, Zhang Xuan only won the bet by luck, and it was a torture for a genius like him to come under the tutelage of a teacher of such horrendous standards. The third to arrive was the youth who specializes in the way of the spear, Zheng Yang. After Zhang Xuan pointed out the problem in Zheng Yang's spear, his strength rose by more than a single fold as a result. Zheng Yang held great confidence towards his teacher, and out of the current few students who acknowledged Zhang Xuan, he was the only one who came to him on his own free will. The fourth to arrive was Wang Ying. The shy lass couldn't help but blush upon catching sight of the other students when she entered and immediately hid at the corner. I should be able to solve the problem of my body today. Zhao Ya opened her eyes. Yesterday, the academy's worst teacher claimed that he was capable of solving her problem after returning to her dormitory. She felt lost and worried, causing her to roll about her bed, only falling asleep after a long time later. Regardless of whether the other party is telling the truth or lying, there would surely be a conclusion by the end of today. When such thoughts struck her, she gargled her mouth, put on her clothes and left the room swiftly. As the daughter of Bai City Lord and one of the top 10 scorers of the entrance examinations, she was granted a personal residence. Unlike the shared dormitory of the other students, there were many rooms in the residence, and the butler, Uncle Yao, stayed in one of the rooms not too far away from hers. Uncle Yao, I'm going to class. Seeing no movements in the room after shouting, Zhao Ya prepared to walk off. Young mistress, wait for me, I will go with you. A shout echoed from beyond the door. The door opened and Yao Han walked out, looking at his face. Zhao Ya was taken aback. Uncle Yao, you, what happened? Zhao Ya was stunned to see Yao Han's swollen face and the dark rings around his eyes in a single night. The dignified Yao Han had been disfigured. If it wasn't for the familiar voice, she wouldn't have known who he was. Oh, I accidentally hit myself after getting too absorbed in my training yesterday, Yao Han explained. Who would hit themselves in the midst of their training? Is it possible for anyone to find an even worse excuse than that? Uncle Yao, what happened? Who did it? No, I have to tell my dad. Zhao Ya exclaimed furiously. Young mistress, don't bother yourself with this. This is my own problem. I can resolve it myself. You better hurry to your class first. I want to see how the teacher you acknowledged is like. If his standards are exactly like what the rumors dictate, I will immediately report this to the city lord and have the Hongshan Academy get a new teacher for you. Yao Han waved his hand imposingly. However, as his movements were too big, his wounds were pulled on and cold sweat drenches his back. Fine. Seeing how adamant Yao Han was against her interference in the matter, Zhao Ya didn't touch any further on the subject. The two of them walked towards Zhang Xuan's classroom. Uncle Yao, given how severely wounded you are, I think you should go back and rest first. I can attend the lesson by myself. There is no need for you to send me. After walking a short distance, Zhao Ya noticed how his entire body was trembling and drenched in sweat. She couldn't help but say these words. Yesterday, Zhang Xuan didn't pull back his blows even in the least. Despite applying medicine on the wounds and resting for a few hours, his wounds were still severe. It was quite incredible that he was even able to walk. Young mistress, the city lord has tasked me to find a good teacher for you before we set off. Yet you had to choose such a fellow. How can I face the city lord in the future? Yao Han said, no matter what, I want to expose the true face of that fellow before you and prove to you that he is a fraud. Only a pure and innocent young mistress would fall for his tricks. Given those standards of his, it is impossible for him to recruit a second student. When you finally witness that there are no other students in his class, you would know that. Sure. The door to the classroom was pushed open, revealing its interior. Within the classroom sat Zhang Xuan and his 4 new students. Chapter 20. Wang Ying's shock. After hearing that the young mistress had acknowledged Zhang Xuan as her master, Yao Han rushed here furiously, oblivious to the fact that Zhang Xuan had already accepted several students. He had just let out word that the other party would be unable to recruit a second student other than the young mistress, but in the next moment, he met Wang Ying and the rest. He felt as though he was slapped in the face in public. His face immediately darkened. Teacher. Zhao Ya also felt a burning sensation on her face, and she felt tempted to find a burrow to hide in. You are all right? A short moment later, Yao Han recovered and stared in confusion at Zhang Xuan. That fellow yesterday was so brutal to him, so he thought that even if Zhang Xuan wasn't reduced to a pighead, he would at the very least be crippled. So why did he seem to be fully intact, to the point of being unable to find even a single scratch on his skin? Actually, even though he said that he wanted to assess Zhang Xuan's standards as a teacher, his true purpose was to see his pathetic state after getting thrashed by the mysterious man. Yet, in the end, as a fighter 6 Dan Pixie realm expert, he went to assault him yet ended up getting beaten up, while the one who he intended to assault wasn't even wounded in the least. He feels as though he had lost greatly and he found it unacceptable. Why wouldn't I be alright? Zhang Xuan knew what Yao Han is thinking, but he replied with a stoic expression. He looks towards Zhao Ya and asked, this disabled person is disabled person? A peculiar expression appeared on Zhao Ya's face before she could speak. A voice interrupted her. You are the one who is disabled. Yao Han suppressed the urge to vomit blood. His eyebrows shot upwards and he flung the sleeves of his robe. I am the butler of Bai City Lord residence. Yao Han. Oh, since you are disabled, you shouldn't be walking around here. Otherwise, if you were to die here, it would be difficult for me to explain. As though not hearing his words, Zhang Xuan gestured to the door. Send off our guest and shut the door. You. Yao Han clenched his fist furiously and almost exploded on the spot. Who was he? The butler of Bai City Lord Residency possessed great authority in the Hongshan Academy. Even the executive of the Education Bureau would have to give in to him, yet a teacher like Zhang Xuan dared to say that he was disabled and even tried to throw him out. How could it be possible for him to not be angry? I want to see how you are going to teach them. Putting his hands behind him, Yao Han stood upright proudly. Oh, since you know that you have to leave, make it fast. We need to maintain a silent atmosphere when teaching the students, so we don't just allow any cats and dogs in our classrooms. Zhang Xuan seemed to be on a different frequency as him, as though hearing nothing at all. He gestured towards the exit yet again. You, who are you calling cat and dog? The rage burned with him and blood flowed out from his wounds. Yao Han trembled uncontrollably. Do you think that I wouldn't dare to kill you with a palm of mine right now? Zhao Ya, send him out, so that I can solve your problem. Couldn't be bothered to argue with the other party. Zhang Xuan signaled to Zhao Ya, Uncle Yao, please leave for the moment. I am about to start lessons. Hearing those words, Zhao Ya's eyes lit up. I am not leaving. I want this fellow to clarify who he is talking about. I, Yao Han, a fighter 6 Dan Pixie realm expert, is respected wherever I go. Who dares to say that I am crippled, even trying to drive me out? Peng. Before he could finish his words, Zhao Ya pushed him out. The next moment, the sight before him turned dark as the door closed on him. If he didn't dodge fast enough, he would have been smacked by the door. Young mistress, standing outside the door, Yao Han frowned and his face twitched. If he was driven out by Zhang Xuan, he would surely retaliate. However, since it was the young mistress who drove him out, he wouldn't dare to lay his hands on her even if he was beaten to death. Even so, he directed all the resentment he had accumulated onto Zhang Xuan. He was unable to understand what capabilities the fellow possessed, to be capable of deluding the young mistress to such an extent. Uncle Yao, I'm sorry to bother you to wait outside. We are going to start lessons. Zhao Ya knew about her own problem. Her own illness must not be revealed to anyone, especially to Uncle Yao. If her teacher was going to help her solve her problem, she would naturally have to drive him away. Fine, young mistress, I will be waiting outside. If anything happens, call me and I will rush in immediately. Hearing the words of the young mistress, Yao Han knew that he would be unable to enter. He was on the verge of erupting, but without a choice. He could only grit his teeth and bear with it. After Yao Han left, only Zhang Xuan's 5 newly accepted students and him remained in the room. Zhang Xuan surveyed the surrounding. Since all of you have acknowledged me as your teacher, you all would be fellow peers. Make sure to take good care of one another so as to not sully my prestige. Prestige. Hearing this word, the 5 students stared at one another. Teacher, you don't seem to have any prestige. Cough cough. Even if we wanted to sully it, there is nothing to sully. My way to teaching is slightly different from the others. I pay particular importance to cater teachings to the student's personal condition. The way to guiding everyone is different. Thus, there is nothing to compare between you all. Zhang Xuan seemed oblivious to the expressions of his students and put on the airs of a teacher. Right now, I will go to the little room by the side when I call your name. Entered the little room. Zhang Xuan's classroom wasn't big, around 100 square meters. Even so, there was a partition in which the teacher was able to give specific guidance to a student. These 5 students were different from one another. If he were to guide them together as a whole, it would be troublesome and highly ineffective. Wang Ying, you are my first student, coming. After which, Zhang Xuan led the way into the small room. Yes. Given Wang Ying's obedient nature, she didn't dare to retort and walked closely behind him. Wang Ying felt a little regretful. Yesterday, she got lost and came over to ask for directions, yet she was scammed into acknowledging this teacher as her mentor. Initially, she didn't know what was going on, but after thinking through it, this teacher didn't seem to be truly capable. Other teachers were able to tell the problem with her leg through her punching routine. However, not only was this fellow unable to tell, he even bragged about being able to cure the injury on her leg. For this injury, her father even found the most famous of physicians, but it was to no avail. Even so, the man before her claimed that he was able to treat her. If this wasn't a scam, what could this be? Furthermore, Liu Loshi told her many things regarding this teacher. Only then did she realize that this teacher had such a radiant background. The first teacher to score a 0 in the teacher qualification examination and the weakest in terms of strength among the teachers. Why was she so unfortunate to be scammed by him and to believe his words? No wonder Big Brother said that there are many bad guys outside. When her elder brother told her that there were untrustworthy people outside, she didn't believe him. Now, looking at the teacher before her, she felt wronged, that she had been lied to. Just as she was thinking about how she should withdraw from the lessons of this teacher, that at most, it would simply end with a scolding and she could find her elder brother to help her find another teacher. She heard a familiar voice sounding out, "Display your battle technique once more." Zhang Xuan sat at the center of the room and looked over with a calm expression. The previous time, when he tried to coax Wang Ying into joining him, the Library of Heaven's Path wasn't activated yet, so he still had no idea what flaws Wang Ying had. Alright. Although Wang Ying was tempted to withdraw from the lessons, she nodded her head after hesitating for a moment. Once again, her fists generated gusts of wind and soon, her punching routine came to an end. Zhang Xuan nodded his head. Although Wang Ying's character might be a little dense, her punching routine was quite satisfactory. Teacher, actually I want to. Wang Ying wavered for a moment, and just when she was about to express her intention to withdraw from Zhang Xuan's lesson, the young man opposite of her spoke. If I'm not wrong, your leg was probably struck by someone during a duel 2 years ago. Zhang Xuan said. You, how did you know? Wang Ying was taken aback. Her words jammed in her mouth as her beautiful eyes widened in circles. She only talked about the injury on her leg yesterday, and not the origin of it. She didn't expect the other party to be capable of telling that it was an injury from someone's blow, and even the time of the injury she couldn't help but be shocked. There are 3 acupoints on a person's leg, and individually, they govern strength, speed and dexterity. When you battled with someone else, the other party accidentally struck the acupoint which governs strength. When this acupoint is struck, it closes, resulting in your blood to flow in reverse, thus preventing you from exerting strength on it like any other normal person. Zhang Zuan stated calmly that Wang Ying's body trembled, her face flushed completely red. For her leg, Wang Ying's father had invited all of the renowned doctors in the kingdom, including the famous Master Yuan Yu. He seemed to have spoken similar words, but even he was unable to identify where the acupoint which governs strength is, thus he was unable to treat her. If she wanted to be treated once and for all, she had to invite a fighter 8 Danzongshi realm master who possessed superior Zenki to treat her, otherwise, it was impossible for the treatment to succeed. Initially, she thought that this teacher who claimed that he would be able to treat her leg was just trying to coax her to come under his tutelage, yet she didn't expect that he would say the exact same words as what Master Yuan Yu said, so how could she not be shocked? Teacher, are you able to treat me? Wang Ying couldn't resist asking. It is just a small matter. Zhang Zuan replied her question blandly. A small matter? Wang Ying's eyes narrowed as her breathing quickened.